Okay, hi, back again for what is our last bit of thinking about syllables. And maybe it's a little bit extra, but I think it's a bit fun and it's a good way to get thinking. So I want to go through arguments for the syllable. Okay, why do we think the syllable exists? Hopefully you've already got a little bit of an overview with what I've had to say about the sonority profile and the sonority hierarchy. That's a pretty good reason for thinking that syllables exist, but you could take the extreme view that really it's just the way that the segments are organised in the flow of speech and there's no larger syllable structure. Okay, so you could take that view. So let's just look through a couple of other arguments for why we think that there's strong evidence that syllables exist in all languages of the world, not just English. But I'll focus on English because it's the language we all share here, I hope. Rightio. So, where's my green pen gone? Ooh. Oh, there it is. If you just have your lecture notes with you, on the last page there's a table of words, and you can see in one column is a list of words that begin with fl plus the vowel, and another list of words that begin with the vowel plus ulf. Now, from the sonority hierarchy, you'll know why the fl has to be flipped around for the coda. Okay, it's to keep a neat sonority profile, with the liquid having higher sonority than the fricative. Okay, so this is, but we've got a list of words here, and if you just were to read through, you can see that we have a whole lot of words that begin with fl and have a following vowel, different vowels. So we've got fleece with E, we've got flip with E, we've got fled with air, fled with air, flack, as in copying some flack, flood, as in the flood that of Noah's Ark, and flop, as in flop down, floor, flop down on the floor, flew, the bird flew over the cuckoo's nest. Then we've got fleur, as in the girl's name. We've got flake, as in cornflakes, I suppose, or snowflakes. Flown, as in flew away, he's flown away. Flounce, there's an old-fashioned word. And fly, okay. All right, so we can see, I think that might even be all of the vowels of English, I'm not sure, or it's most of them anyway. But then when we look at ulf, we find that there's no words that end in eilf, but we've certainly got a word like sylph. Her sylph-like form was entrancing the young men. That's a sentence I know, never mind. We don't have a word that ends in elf, that's not possible. But we have a word that ends in elf, as in self. We can have a word that ends in alf, as in Ralph, that's okay. And we can have a word that ends in ulf, that's okay too, all right? But we can't have a word that ends in, oh, that's just an accident, golf. Oh, golf I've got there, sorry. Ulf and golf is okay as well, golf. But we can't have orf, or ulf, or earlf, or ailf. I hope you're hearing that these are sounding bad. Or Olf, gosh, that's even hard to say for me. Alf or Ilf. I hope you agree that they're not possible words. Okay, so I'm sure you've seen very quickly that we have quite permissible what can occur in the vowel slot when the onset is fl, but we're very restricted as to what can occur in the vowel slot when the coda is ulf. And you can see that they're only short vowels, okay? So it is tricky to explain this without reference to a higher structure where these form a rhyme with a nucleus and a coda of some sort of vowel here, and then here we've got the ulf. Okay, so it's possibly some sort of a Moraïc restriction. I will just say this particular example is at a higher theoretical level, probably a little bit hard to explain. It's one of the more controversial things, I guess, in theory. But the point of this example is to show you that there are clearly restrictions on what can happen in the rhyme between the vowel and the coda, but there's no restrictions in what can happen between the onset and the rhyme because they're at a higher structure. Okay, so fl is in the, I'll just write that maybe here, where will I write that? So, oh gosh, I'm running a bit out of space here. So fl is in the onset and the vowel is in the rhyme, and they're separate structures in the syllable, okay? And that's going up to the syllable, and then an onset would be over here. And so what occurs there doesn't really matter, okay? So they're in separate parts of the syllable, okay? So the restrictions tend to occur there. There are many examples you can give of processes that happen only in the rhyme and don't cross the onset and the rhyme, okay? I probably won't go into any more of those now because we spend a lot of time on the grammar. Instead, I will give you some what we call phonetic arguments for why we think syllables exist. And this comes down to phonetic timing. Okay, so I need you to work with me a little bit here. I'm going to give a slightly crazy example. I'm going to have, I want you to imagine a case trip. I don't know what a case trip is, but a trip for getting a case. I'm going to get a suitcase. Okay, so yeah, you had to buy a suitcase and you went, so you went on a suitcase trip. Okay, that sounds sensible, vaguely. And then please just work with me and pretend that there's a product called a case strip. Okay, maybe it's some sort of Band-Aid. I don't know. All right, I want you to say those words to yourself, case trip and case strip. And I want you to tell me whether the S is longer in, now I'm going to confuse myself, in case trip or in case strip. Okay, so pause the recording if you have to. And I'm going to start doing syllables. K, strip, and then same thing over here. They're actually the same segments. Case, trip. Okay, so I'll make this one case trip, and this one is case strip. Okay, and now let me do the structures above those. So I'll just go, here's the onset, here's a nucleus, coda, they form a rhyme, and we go up to a syllable, and let's just say that that's a word there. Oh, no, I'm just going to ignore the word here, all right? Just going to ignore the word. And so here I've got a onset, I've got a nucleus with two slots, S is a coda, there they go. That forms a rhyme, and there's a syllable. Okay, case trip. And then here, we've got onset, nucleus, and that's also going up into a rhyme already, and they form a syllable. And then here, I'm just going to do a dot to mark that boundary, okay? And then here we've got 3 in the onset. We've got a nucleus. I really hope I'm not going to make a mistake here because it's so easy to make mistakes if you do it quickly. All right, case strip. All right, now, I hope you think that the S in case strip is shorter than the S in case trip. Case trip, case strip. Okay. It actually is just a question of whether you hear it or not. Okay. And the reason for this is that here, the S in case strip is sharing the onset of the syllable with 2 other segments. And this onset has its own little timing slot. So this onset timing slot is being spread out between 3 segments. Okay. Yeah, whereas over here, this little coda it has its own timing slot, but it's only got one segment, okay? The S there, the alveolar fricative. All right, so it gets, I know it's part of the rhyme, and sure, you know, the rhyme is its own timing slot that has a nucleus timing slot and a coda timing slot, but still this S has its coda to itself. All right, whereas this S, this alveolar fricative here, has to share its onset with two others. So that means it ends up a bit shorter. Okay, at the same time, you may or may not have noticed that the A is a little bit longer there. Okay, and here the A is a little bit shorter because it's got the following S in the coda. All right, if you can't hear these things, don't stress, but a lot of people can hear them if you say it to yourself, you know, slowly enough and carefully enough. All right, so there's lots and lots of phonetic timing properties to do with the various components of the syllable structure. So there's very strong evidence from that deep down, nitty-gritty, down in the weeds phonetics. Okay, so yeah, that's another example. You don't need to know this. This is just, you know, helping you think about syllable structure and see more examples of syllables being written up as I write. No, I don't write anymore. I try and rub this off. Okay, so bear with me because we're going to go on to the many psychological reasons to believe that syllables exist, but I'll just give you one, which is to do with slips of the tongue. Okay, so slips of the tongue certainly provide very good evidence for syllable structure and planning beyond the immediate, beyond all the immediate segments. Okay, so, you know, spoonerisms, those kinds of things. But okay, I know that you've probably come across many slips of the tongue. Oh, okay, so oh, I'll rub that one out over here as well. I'll just give you one example. That's I said, and that is a particularly neat example of psychological reality. Anyway, I was yapping away, and I wanted to say fluctuate 0.3. That's what I wanted to say. So I will just write that out. I'll forget the point, write the 3, but I'll write point. So you might say ch instead of y there, but instead of t, but that's okay. Fluctuate point oi. There we go. Point. All right. So I'll start with this one. Here we go. We've got our nucleus. There's our coda. They form a rhyme. Here's our onset, and there we go, a syllable. All right. Okay, so nucleus, coda, these bits don't really matter. Rhyme, that's a syllable there. Here's another syllable. Remember, our vowels have to go into a nucleus. So that's a rhyme. Tia is the onset. Have I done that right? Yes, I have. Okay. And they form a syllable. So here we've got an onsetless syllable. Okay, there's no onset there. We've just got two vowels after each other. Here I've applied the maximum onset principle because I know that words in English can begin with y. It's a semi-vowel, it has to go into the onset. And they can begin with t, as in tune or tuner, but they can't begin with kt. So there we go, I have to have a syllable break, syllable boundary there. So k clearly goes into the coda, and here's our nucleus. Nucleus coda forms a rhyme, and here we've got an onset. Phew, okay, I think that's it. I think I've done it. And I better link those up in good form to a word. There we go, word, and I'll link this up to a word as well. Okay, missing the level of the foot that we're going to do next. Okay, so I wanted to say fluctuate 0.3. That's what I wanted to say. Instead, I said fluctuate. I put a n. Can you see that? I hope you can. I put a n. I said fluctuate. Now clearly, I got that n from the following word point. That word was far away from what I was starting to say here. Okay. Now, where did I get that n from? I got that n from the coda. I've got a nasal plus a stop. Here I put the nasal in before the stop. So I put an extra coda in there. Okay, fluctuate. Fluctuate. All right. It was probably a velar nasal, but I'm going to ignore that for now. All right, the point is it's a nasal. It probably assimilated to the following velar later on, but that's not the point. The point is, if there was no syllable structure, if there was no overarching sense, why wouldn't I have just, I don't know, put the P in there and said fluctuate? Why didn't I do that? Puh, I didn't. Why, for that matter, did I not just get the, I took the n from there, okay? I actually took the n. Why didn't I take the oi? I could have gone fluctuate. Well, that would have been crazy, okay? So we know that when people make these slips of the tongue, and you can get all sorts of funny things, okay? But it'll always be an onset replacing an onset, or a coda replacing a coda, that kind of thing, okay? So, you know, otherwise, or why didn't I just, you know, yeah, there's a lot of things I could have done that I didn't do. So there's a clear psychological evidence as well that speakers plan ahead. And they're referring. Also, by the way, these kinds of slips of the tongue target stressed syllables, and we will look at stress in the next lesson. But yeah, this is evidence that speakers plan far ahead, okay, when they're speaking. Yeah, and a little signal mix-up means that there's something goes wrong with our motor planning, and what was meant to occur later on gets put earlier on. All right, so that's really all I wanted to say about, you know, some arguments for why we think syllables exist. As I say, they are in all languages. Yeah, so that's it. Okay, thank you.